There is a place in Illinois where the ground rises up out of the flat earth like a sleeping giant. Before we go any further into this story, if you want a brand new American mystery every single night, subscribe. One tap and a new story is waiting for you every evening. The Mound sits there in the middle of the Mississippi floodplain, broad and patient, covered now in green grass and quiet air. It is bigger than the Great Pyramid of Giza at its base, and almost nobody knows it exists. That is where this story begins. Not with explorers, not with the pilgrims landing on a cold New England shore, not with any of the stories we were taught in school. This story begins 1,000 years ago in a city that rose up out of the American earth and became something extraordinary. A city of 20,000 people. A city with wide plazas and painted temples and a sky full of ceremony. A city that hummed and breathed and fed itself and watched the stars. And then, somewhere around the year 1400, went completely silent. Nobody knows exactly why. That silence is what we are here to sit with tonight. The place is called Cahokia now. That name came later, borrowed from a tribe that lived nearby centuries after the city had already emptied out. The people who actually built it, who carried the dirt and raised the mounds and lit the fires in the long houses. We do not know what they called themselves. We do not know what they called their city. That knowledge is gone, folded into the earth with their bones. What we do know is this. Around the year 1050 AD, something remarkable happened on the eastern bank of the Mississippi River, just a few miles from where St. Louis, Missouri, stands today. A settlement that had been modest and quiet for generations suddenly exploded. The population surged. The mounds went up fast, faster than archaeologists expected when they started doing the math. Thousands of people arrived, or were born, or both. A city took shape out of the soft, black soil of the floodplain, and it became the largest urban center north of Mexico for the next 300 years. Think about that for a moment. While the Crusades were reshaping Europe, while Notre Dame Cathedral was being built stone by stone in Paris, while the Aztec Empire was still centuries away from rising in central Mexico. Right here, in the heart of what would one day be called America, a great city stood, and then it was gone. Prairie swallowed it slowly. The mounds stayed, because you cannot make 100 million cubic feet of packed earth disappear overnight. But the people left. The trade routes went quiet. The fires in the great central plaza stopped burning. The wooden temples rotted and fell. The fields went fallow. And the land that had held one of the most complex societies in the ancient world became, over the following centuries, a place where farmers plowed their fields and occasionally turned up strange things in the soil and wondered what they meant. When European settlers first encountered the mounds in the 1800s, many of them refused to believe that Native Americans had built them. The mounds were too big, they said, too organized, too impressive. So they invented a lost race of mound builders, a mythical vanished people who were conveniently not the ancestors of anyone still living. It was a comfortable story for people who wanted the land to feel empty and ownerless. It was also completely wrong. The mounds were built by people, real people, with families and politics and hunger and ambition. People who looked up at the same stars we look at now and tried to make sense of them. People who built a city so large and so alive that its influence spread from the Great Lakes all the way down to the Gulf Coast. And then they walked away. That is the mystery. Not just what happened, but who they were, what they believed, how they organized a city of that size without wheels, without metal tools, without horses, how they fed 20,000 mouths in a world before agriculture had fully taken hold, and why, after 300 years of building something extraordinary, they let it go. The answers are buried in the earth. Some of them have been dug up carefully, brushed clean, and studied under bright lights in university labs. Some of them are still down there, waiting, and some of them may never come up at all. But the mounds are still there, rising out of the Illinois plain like a message written in dirt, patient as the earth itself, still waiting for someone to read them. Close your eyes for a moment and try to find it. Not on a map, not in a textbook. Find it the way the land itself remembers it, through soil and water and the slow press of 1,000 years of seasons. You are standing at the edge of the Mississippi River. The year is somewhere around 1050 AD. air smells like mud and green things, like river water warming in the sun, like wood smoke drifting low across flat ground. The sky above you is enormous. Out here, the sky is always enormous. There are no mountains to break it, no hills to soften it. Just that wide, pale blue dome pressing down on a world that stretches in every direction like an open hand. The land is called the American Bottom. That's what people call it now, anyway. Back then, it had no name you'd recognize. It was simply the world. It was home. The American Bottom is a floodplain. It sits between the Mississippi River to the west and a line of limestone bluffs to the east. The bluffs are pale and chalky, streaked with shadow. They rise maybe 100 feet above the flat ground below. Between those bluffs and the river, the land spreads out for miles, rich, dark, impossibly fertile soil that the river has been laying down for 10,000 years. Every flood season, the Mississippi gives a little more of itself to this ground. The earth here is almost black. You can push your fingers into it and feel how soft it is, how full of life. There are lakes scattered across the floodplain. Oxbow lakes, the geologists call them, old loops of the river that got cut off and left behind, still and dark and ringed with cattails. Herons stand in the shallows like gray statues. Turtles sun themselves on half-submerged logs. In the mornings, fog sits on the water like a low white ceiling, and the whole world feels muffled and close. The trees along the river are cottonwood and willow, their roots drinking deep. Farther back from the water, the land opens into prairie. Tall grasses, chest-high in summer, gold and copper in the fall, bending in long, slow waves when the wind comes through. The prairie goes on and on. It goes on until you stop believing it will ever end. This is the world the city was built into, not carved out of wilderness, exactly, woven into it. The people who came here didn't fight the land. They read it the way you might read a face, looking for what it was offering, what it was withholding, what it might give if you asked the right way. And what it offered was extraordinary. The river gave fish, catfish as long as a man's arm, pulled up on lines in the dark before dawn. The wetlands gave waterfowl, ducks, and geese in numbers that could darken the sky during migration. a living cloud of wings passing overhead in the gray October light. The forests gave deer and turkey and hickory nuts and acorns. The black soil gave corn. So much corn. Corn was the engine that made everything else possible, and this ground could grow it like nowhere else on the continent. The climate in 1050 was warmer than it is today. Historians call it the medieval warm period. Growing seasons were longer. Rainfall was steadier. The river flooded reliably, refreshing the soil every year like clockwork. The conditions were almost perfect, and the people who lived here knew it. They had been building in this place for generations before the city truly rose. Small villages first, scattered across the floodplain, connected by trails through the grass. Then something shifted. Something changed in how people organized themselves, how they thought about space and power and the sky above them. The villages began to consolidate. People moved closer together, and the mounds began to rise. The mounds are what the ground has kept for us. Everything else, the wooden homes, the thatched roofs, the baskets and clothing and faces of the people, all of that is gone, returned to the soil. But the mounds remain. More than 100 of them, spread across 6 square miles of the floodplain, still standing after 1,000 years of plowing and building and forgetting. They are made of earth, just earth, carried by hand, basket by basket, generation by generation, piled and shaped and packed, until they became something that looked almost deliberate enough to be impossible, because they are deliberate, every one of them. And the ground beneath your feet right now still holds the shape of what was here. It remembers. Even when we forgot, the ground did not. Picture a morning in the year 1100. The sun is just clearing the eastern horizon. The sky above the Mississippi floodplain is pale gold, streaked with thin clouds the color of wood smoke. The air smells of river mud and cook fires, and something sweeter, maybe corn, maybe cedar, maybe both. A woman walks out of her house. She is young, maybe 20. She carries a clay pot on her hip, the kind with a smooth red finish and a pattern of small diamonds pressed into the rim. Her feet are bare on the packed earth. She moves without hurrying. She has somewhere to be, but the morning is soft and she knows it. Around her, the the city is waking up. That is the word for it. City, not a camp, not a village, not a settlement, a city. And in the year 1100, this city on the banks of the Mississippi was home to somewhere between 10,000 and 20,000 people. Some estimates push higher. The true number is still argued over, still uncertain. But even the low end puts Cahokia among the largest cities on earth at that time. London in 1100 held maybe 10,000 souls inside its walls. Paris was not much bigger. Cahokia sat on the same scale, maybe larger. A place most Americans have never heard of, rising out of the Illinois bottomland, full of people who were fully, completely, undeniably alive. The woman with the clay pot is not alone. She never could be. The central plaza of Cahokia stretched nearly 50 acres. That is 40 football fields of open, carefully maintained ground. Around its edges, houses stood in tight rows, their walls made of woven branches packed with clay, their roofs thatched with river grass. Smoke rose from 100 cook fires. Children ran between the buildings. Dogs trotted along the paths with their noses down. Somewhere near the center of all this, a man was already at work. He was a craftsman, a maker of fine stone tools. He sat cross-legged on a woven mat, a piece of chert in his left hand, and a small antler tool in his right. His hands moved with the kind of patience that only comes from doing something 10,000 times. The chips of stone fell around him in a pale ring. He did not look up when people passed. He was thinking about the shape inside the rock. Not far from him, a trader was arranging his goods. He had come a long way. The copper disc in his hands had been hammered out somewhere near the Great Lakes, hundreds of miles to the north. The shells laid out beside it had come from the Gulf Coast, maybe farther. Cahokia sat at the center of a trade network that reached from the Rocky Mountains to the Atlantic coast, from the Canadian border to the Gulf of Mexico. Goods flowed in. Goods flowed out. Ideas traveled with them. Styles of pottery, ways of building, stories. That is what a city does. It pulls things toward itself. People, goods, beliefs, languages. Cahokia pulled hard. The woman with the clay pot made her way to the water. she filled the pot at the creek that ran along the eastern edge of the plaza. She watched a group of men moving in the distance, carrying long wooden poles on their shoulders. They were heading toward the great mound at the north end of the plaza, the mound that rose 100 feet into the sky, the one that seemed, from a distance, like a hill the earth had grown on purpose. She watched them for a moment. Then she turned and walked back toward her house. She had corn to grind. She had children to feed. She had a life that was ordinary in the way that all lives are ordinary from the inside. She did not think of herself as living in a wonder. She just lived there. The mounds were simply part of the sky. The plaza was simply the ground under her feet. The city was simply home. That is the thing about Cahokia that is hardest to hold in your mind. It was not a ruin when she lived there. It was not a mystery. It was a place where people woke up in the morning and went about their days, where someone was always grinding corn, where someone was always shaping stone, where the smell of the river mixed with the smell of food and fire, and the particular warmth of a lot of human bodies living close together. It was alive, completely, stubbornly, beautifully alive. And then, slowly, it wasn't. But that part comes later. For now, the morning is still gold. The woman is still walking. The city is still waking up. Picture a morning in the year 1100. The sun comes up slow and orange over the Mississippi floodplain. Mist sits on the water like a white blanket. The air smells of wet earth and wood smoke and something sweet, maybe corn, already roasting somewhere nearby. The city is waking up. You can hear it before you can see it. The low murmur of voices, the knock of a wooden mallet, children running on packed dirt paths between houses, dogs barking at nothing in particular. These are the sounds of 20,000 people starting their day, the same way they started it yesterday and the day before that. The houses were small and close together. They were built from wooden poles pushed into the ground, then woven with branches, and plastered over with a thick mix of mud and grass. The walls dried hard in the summer heat. They held warmth in the cold months. Inside, a family might have a central fire pit, a few clay pots, sleeping mats woven from river reeds, simple things, good things. The women of Cahokia were the farmers. They worked the fields that spread out beyond the city's edge. Long, flat stretches of dark soil that the Mississippi had been building up for thousands of years. They grew corn, beans, and squash together in the same mounds of earth. These three crops fed each other. The corn grew tall and gave the beans something to climb. The beans put good things back into the soil. The squash spread wide along the ground and kept the weeds down. The Cahokians didn't invent this system, but they used it well. It fed a city. The men hunted and fished and traded. The river gave them everything. Catfish as long as a man's arm, mussels pulled from the shallows, ducks and geese in the fall, so many they darkened the sky when they flew south. The forests beyond the floodplain held deer and turkey and black bear. A good hunter could bring home enough meat to last a family through a cold week. But Cahokia was more than a farming village. It was a city in the truest sense. Craftspeople worked in dedicated areas, making things not just for themselves, but for others. Potters shaped clay into bowls and jars with smooth curves and careful designs. Flint knappers chipped stone into blades and arrowheads with a skill that took years to learn. Bead makers worked with shell and copper, shaping small pieces into jewelry that traveled hundreds of miles through trade. Copper came down from the Great Lakes. Shells came up from the Gulf Coast. Chert, a fine stone good for making tools, came from quarries far to the east. All of it moved through Cahokia. The city sat at the center of a web of trails and waterways that reached across the whole middle of the continent. Traders arrived by canoe, paddling up the Missouri and the Illinois and the Ohio. They brought things you couldn't find on the floodplain. They left with things they couldn't find anywhere else. The central plaza was the heart of it all. It was enormous, a flat open space bigger than 50 football fields, kept clear of grass and weeds. People gathered there for markets and ceremonies and games. The game of Chunkey was played there, a fast and serious sport where players threw spears at a rolling stone disc. Men bet everything on Chunkey. Their tools, their food, sometimes their freedom. The game mattered in ways that are hard to explain now. It wasn't just sport. It was something closer to prayer. At the edge of the plaza, the great mound rose up. Even in daily life, even on an ordinary Tuesday in the year 1100, that mound was always there. You could see it from anywhere in the city. It caught the morning light and held it. It was the tallest thing for 100 miles in any direction. The people who lived in its shadow knew it was special. They built it that way on purpose. And yet, most days were quiet. Most days were just days. A woman grinding corn into flour, the stones scraping in a steady rhythm. A child chasing a dog through the narrow lanes between houses. An old man sitting in the sun, watching the river. The smell of food cooking. The sound of the city breathing. This was Cahokia at its height. Not a ruin, not a mystery. A living place, full of people who knew each other's names, who argued and laughed and fell asleep tired at the end of long days. They didn't know they were building something the world would forget. They were just living. Stand at the base of Monk's Mound on a quiet morning. The dew is still on the grass. The sky is pale and wide, and the color of old pewter. You are standing in a suburb of St. Louis, Illinois. Cars pass somewhere behind you. A lawnmower hums in the distance, and yet something is wrong with the scale of what you're looking at. The thing in front of you is not a hill. It is too regular, too deliberate. The sides rise at the same angle all the way up. The top is flat, like a table set for a giant. The mound stands 100 feet tall. It covers 14 acres at its base. That is bigger than the Great Pyramid of Giza at its footprint. Not as tall, no, but wider, heavier, more ground claimed. You are looking at the largest earthen structure ever built in North America, and someone built it by hand. There were no machines, no iron tools, no wheels. The people who raised this mound carried the earth in baskets woven from river grass. They dug the soil with wooden spades and deer antlers and their own bare hands. They walked up and down, 10,000 times, 100,000 times more. They piled the earth in layers. They packed it down. They shaped it like they were shaping something sacred, because they were. Archaeologists have studied those layers. Each one is distinct. Different soil, different color, different texture. Some layers are dark and rich. Others are pale clay pulled from deep in the ground. The builders chose their materials carefully. They were not just piling dirt. They were building something with intention, something that was meant to last, and it has lasted nearly 1,000 years. The mound was built in stages over several centuries, starting around 900 AD and growing through Cahokia's peak. Each new generation added to it. Each new layer was a kind of statement. We are still here. We are still building. The city is still alive. At the top, there was once a large wooden building. The post holes are still there in the earth, faint shadows of something that stood and then fell. Archaeologists think it was a temple or a palace, maybe both. The chief who lived or worshipped there would have stood at the top and looked out over the whole city spread below. The grand plaza to the south. The smaller mounds arranged like satellites around a sun. The river glinting in the distance. The fields beyond the city, green and gold depending on the season. From up there, you could see everything. That was probably the point. Power in Cahokia was not just political. It was physical. It was visible. The mound said, without words, that the people who built it could move the earth itself, that they could organize thousands of workers across years and decades, that their leader stood closer to the sky than anyone else. The height was the message. Now here is the thing that doesn't quite fit. The mound is not alone. There are more than 100 other mounds at Cahokia. Some are small, barely a few feet high. Others are substantial. They are arranged in groups, in lines, in patterns that seem to follow some logic that archaeologists are still working to understand. The whole site covers nearly 4,000 acres. That is 6 square miles of deliberate, shaped earth. 6 square miles of intention. And at the center of all of it, Monk's Mound sits like something that was placed there before the rest. Like the first word in a sentence. Like the note that sets the key for everything that follows. Some researchers believe the mound's placement was chosen for astronomical reasons. The main axis of the Grand Plaza aligns with the sunrise at certain times of year. The mound itself may have been oriented to catch specific light at specific moments. The sky mattered to these people. The sun mattered. The seasons mattered in ways that went deeper than farming. But here is what nobody has fully explained. The mound has a terrace on its south side, a kind of step or platform partway up. It doesn't appear to be structural. It wasn't needed to hold the mound together. It was added deliberately at some point for some reason. And that reason is still not clear. It is a small thing, maybe. A ledge of earth on an ancient hill. But it sits there in the morning light, patient and quiet, holding whatever it knows close to its chest. The dew dries off the grass. The sky brightens, and the mound just waits, the way it has always waited, for someone to finally ask the right question. $50 million baskets of dirt. Say that number slowly. Let it sit with you for a moment. 50 million baskets, each one carried by hand, each one filled with heavy black earth, each one hauled up a slope that kept getting steeper with every passing year. That is what archaeologists believe it took to build Monk's Mound alone. Not the whole city, just the one big mound at the center of it all. People who live near Cahokia today will tell you something interesting. They'll lean against a fence post or pull up a chair on a porch and say it plain. The mound doesn't feel built. It feels grown, like it came up out of the earth, the way a blister rises on skin, slow, from pressure underneath, from something pushing hard against the surface. That's not a scientific theory. That's just what people feel when they stand at the base of it and look up. And that feeling matters. Because folklore lives in the space between what we can prove and what we can't stop believing. The local stories around Collinsville, Illinois, the small town that now sits beside the old city's bones, have been trading versions of the same tale for generations. Farmers who plowed the surrounding fields would find things. A smooth stone carved into a shape that had no business being a stone. A piece of copper, green and thin as a leaf, pressed flat by centuries of soil. Pottery shards with marks on them that looked almost like writing, but weren't quite. These things turned up in the furrows like secrets the ground couldn't keep anymore. The old-timers called the mounds the work of a lost race. That was the common explanation for a long time, and it wasn't a fringe idea. It was the mainstream one. Educated men in the 1800s looked at Cahokia and decided, with great confidence, that the Native Americans living nearby could not possibly have built something so large. So they invented a vanished civilization, a race of mound builders, ancient and mysterious, wiped out before history began. It was a comfortable story. It kept the world simple. It was also completely wrong. The people who built Cahokia were ancestors of the tribes that still live across the Midwest and the South today. The Osage, the Quapaw, the Chickasaw, the Caddo. Their blood runs in living people. Their hands shaped every one of those 50 million baskets. There was no lost race. There was only a lost story, and the story got lost on purpose, buried under a century of bad assumptions and willful forgetting. But here's what the local folklore got right, even when it got the details wrong. It understood the scale. It understood that something extraordinary had happened here. The people who farmed these fields in the 1800s didn't have the tools to explain what they were walking on, but they knew they were walking on something. The earth felt different. The mounds rose out of the flat Illinois plain like sleeping giants, too regular to be natural, too massive to ignore. One story that circulates in the area goes like this. A farmer digging a drainage ditch near the edge of the old city hit a layer of burned wood about 4 feet down. Beneath the wood was a floor, smooth, packed, deliberate. He stopped digging and went to get his neighbor. His neighbor came and looked and said, "Somebody lived here. Not something, somebody." And they covered it back up and didn't speak of it much after that. That story might be true. It might be a version of something true. It might be 3 different true stories folded together over time. That's how folklore works. It compresses. It keeps the feeling even when it loses the facts. And the feeling it keeps is this: the ground here is not empty. It never was. Archaeologists who have worked the Cahokia site for decades will tell you the same thing in different words. Every time they think they've mapped the full extent of the city, they find something else. Another structure, another post hole, another layer of occupation beneath the one they were already studying. The city keeps revealing itself in pieces, like a long story told by someone who pauses often and chooses their words carefully. 50 million baskets of dirt didn't appear overnight. The city grew across generations, maybe centuries, built by people who believed deeply in what they were making. They believed it enough to carry all that weighed up all those slopes with nothing but their hands and woven baskets and the slow accumulation of shared effort. Whatever they were building toward, they meant it. Nobody knows what the people who lived there called their city. Think about that for a moment. We have a name for the place, Cahokia, but that name came from a small tribe who lived nearby when French explorers arrived in the 1600s. The Cahokia people were not the builders. They were not the descendants of the builders. They were simply the ones who happened to be standing on the land when Europeans showed up and started asking questions. So the explorers wrote down what they heard, and the name stuck. And now we call a 1,000-year-old city after people who had nothing to do with building it. The real name, the name the builders used, the name they whispered in their homes and shouted across their plazas, is gone, swallowed by time. That silence is one of the strangest things about this place. Most great cities leave their names behind. Rome is still Rome. Athens is still Athens. Even cities that fell left their names carved into stone or pressed into clay tablets. But the people of this city, the ones who hauled 50 million baskets of dirt and raised a mound taller than a 10-story building, left no writing, no carved inscriptions, no clay records, nothing with a name on it, just the mounds themselves, rising out of the Illinois plain like a question nobody can answer. The land, though, has a much longer story. People had been living along the Mississippi River for thousands of years before anyone built a single mound at Cahokia. Long before the great city rose, small groups of hunters and farmers moved through this floodplain. They followed the deer. They fished the river. They planted small gardens of corn and squash in the soft, black soil near the water's edge. The land was generous here. The river flooded every spring and left behind a thick layer of silt, dark and rich as anything you'd find on earth. Growing things here was easy. Staying here made sense. Archaeologists call the earliest people in this region the archaic peoples. here as far back as 8,000 years ago. 8,000 years. That number is hard to hold in your mind. It means that when the ancient Egyptians were just beginning to build their first monuments, people were already walking this floodplain, already reading the river, already knowing the land. Then, slowly, something shifted. Around 2,000 years ago, a culture archaeologists call the Hopewell tradition began to spread across the eastern half of North America. These were not one tribe or one people. They were a loose web of communities connected by trade and shared ideas. They built earthworks. They buried their dead with care and ceremony. They moved copper from the Great Lakes and shells from the Gulf Coast and obsidian from the Rocky Mountains across hundreds of miles. They were doing something that looked, in its own way, like civilization. The Hopewell tradition faded around 500 AD. Nobody knows exactly why. The trade networks thinned. The big earthworks stopped. The communities pulled inward. But the people stayed. They always stayed. For the next 500 years, smaller farming villages dotted the floodplain around what would become Cahokia. Archaeologists call these people the late woodland culture. They grew corn. They built small ceremonial mounds. They lived quiet, rooted lives along the river. Nothing about them suggested what was coming. Then, around 1050 AD, something happened. Archaeologists call it the Cahokia Big Bang. In what seems, by archaeological standards, like almost no time at all, the scattered villages transformed into a city. The mounds went up fast. The central plaza was laid out with precision. The population exploded. People came from hundreds of miles away. The city organized itself, fed itself, governed itself, and reached out across the continent with trade and influence. Where did this energy come from? What sparked it? Nobody agrees. Some researchers think a charismatic leader rose up. Someone with the power to organize thousands of people around a shared vision. Others think a new religious movement swept through the region. Something that promised connection to the sky, to the corn, to something larger than any single life. Others point to climate. The medieval warm period brought reliable rains and long growing seasons. The land could support more people than ever before. Maybe the city was simply what happens when the earth is generous and the conditions are right. Maybe all of those things were true at once. What we know is this: a city rose on the Mississippi floodplain with no warning and no clear explanation. It had no name we can recover. It had no writing we can read. It had no single origin story anyone has been able to pin down. It simply appeared, like something the land had been waiting to say. Picture a man standing in a cornfield in southern Illinois. The year is 1964. His name is Warren Whittrey, and he has a problem he can't shake loose. Whittrey was an archaeologist, not the kind who dreamed of treasure, the kind who got excited about dirt, about layers, about what the ground holds when nobody's been paying attention. He'd been poking around the Cahokia site for years, and the more he looked, the more he felt the place was trying to tell him something he didn't have the language for yet. He wasn't the first to look. Plenty of people had come before him. Surveyors in the early 1800s walked these fields and counted the mounds. They sketched them in notebooks with careful ink lines. They measured the distances between them, but they were looking at pieces. Whittrey was starting to see the whole picture. What he found, slowly, mound by mound and plaza by plaza, was a city with a plan. Not a random scattering of earthworks. Not a loose collection of villages that happened to grow close together. A designed city, intentional, organized around open spaces, the way a cathedral is organized around its nave. The central plaza alone stretched nearly a mile from end to end. It was flat and packed and deliberately cleared. You could stand at one end and see the other. Monk's Mound rose at the north edge like a green mountain, watching over everything below. Around that central plaza, smaller plazas fanned out in 4 directions: north, south, east, west, each one surrounded by its own ring of mounds. Archaeologists would eventually map more than 120 mounds across the whole site. Some were tall and steep. Some were long and low, like sleeping animals under the grass. Some were shaped for ceremony, some for burial, some for the homes of the people who held power. The layout wasn't accidental. That's what kept Whittrey up at night. The whole city seemed to be oriented around the sun. The central axis ran almost perfectly east to west. The plazas aligned with the solstices. The mounds faced the sunrise. Someone, 1,000 years ago, had looked at the sky and then looked at the ground and decided the two should match. One theory says this was purely religious, that Cahokia was a sacred city built to mirror the heavens, a place where the world above and the world below touched. The mounds were the meeting point. The plazas were the stage. The people who lived here weren't just building a city. They were building a cosmology. Another theory says it was political, that the layout of the city was a map of power. The closer your home sat to Monk's Mound, the higher you're standing. The farther out you lived, toward the edges where the mounds grew smaller and the plazas thinned, the less you mattered to the people at the center. The city's shape was a statement. It said, in dirt and sky and distance, here is who we are, and here is who rules us. Both theories might be true at once. Power and religion have always slept in the same bed. Witchery kept digging. Other archaeologists joined him over the decades. They brought better tools, better maps, ground-penetrating radar, soil samples, carbon dating. Each new tool peeled back another layer of what the city had been. They found evidence of wooden walls, massive palisades that once ringed the inner city, built and rebuilt at least 4 times. Thousands of logs, stripped and sharpened and driven into the earth. Those walls meant something. They meant the people inside wanted to separate themselves from the people outside. They meant there was an inside and an outside to begin with. They found evidence of workshops, neighborhoods where craftsmen shaped flint and carved shell and fired clay, districts almost the way a modern city has districts, a place for making things, a place for trading them, a place for the sacred, a place for the dead. The more they found, the stranger it became, because for all the evidence of organization, of planning, of a city that knew exactly what it was, there was almost nothing that told them who was in charge. No inscriptions, no royal tombs with names carved above the door, no written record of any kind. Someone designed this city. Someone held it together for 300 years. Someone made the decisions that kept 20,000 people fed and housed and pointed in the same direction, and that person left no name behind. Just the shape of the city itself, still pressed into the earth, still pointing east toward the morning sun, still waiting for someone to ask the right question. There is a woman named Karen who has studied the Mounds for 30 years. She is an archaeologist. She has published papers, attended conferences, spent whole summers with her hands in the dirt. She is not the kind of person who uses words like felt or sensed when she is talking about science. But she will tell you about the morning she stood inside the Woodhenge at sunrise, and her voice gets quiet when she does. She had been there a dozen times before. She knew the site. She knew the cedar posts were reconstructions, replicas set into the earth to mark where the originals once stood. She knew the math behind it all. But on that particular morning in late March, the equinox morning, she walked to her spot inside the circle and turned east. The sun came up exactly where it was supposed to, exactly where the ancient builders had planned for it to come up 1,000 years ago. And she stood there and could not move for a long time. She said it felt like being seen. The Woodhenge is not one circle. It is 5 of them, built one after another over the course of Cahokia's long life. Each one was a ring of tall cedar posts, some of them 2 feet wide, set deep into the red clay of the floodplain. The largest circle stretched nearly 400 feet across. The posts rose high enough to cast long shadows across the plaza. From certain spots inside the ring, you could watch the sun rise in perfect alignment with Monk's Mound on the summer solstice. The whole city became a kind of instrument, a clock, a calendar, a conversation with the sky. Archaeologists call the man who found it Warren Whittree. He noticed the patterns in the post holes during excavations in the 1960s. He named it Woodhenge himself, borrowing the name from the famous stone circle in England. The comparison was not accidental. Both sites seem to have been built to track the movement of the sun. Both seem to have been places where people gathered at certain moments of the year. Both feel, even now, like places where something important happened. A man named David, a Lakota elder who visited the site some years ago, said the feeling inside the circle was familiar to him. He had felt it in other places, sacred places. He said the land itself holds memory. He said some places remember what happened there, the way old wood remembers fire. He did not say this to convince anyone. He said it the way you say something true that you have known for a long time. The question the Woodhenge raises is not a small one. To build a structure that tracks the solstices and equinoxes with that kind of precision, you need years of careful watching. You need people who record what they see. You need a system for passing that knowledge down. Cahokia had all of that. The city was not just a place where people lived. It was a place where people thought deeply about time, about the sky, about the relationship between the earth and the sun. Some researchers believe the Woodhenge was the center of a ritual calendar that organized the entire city's life. Planting, harvesting, ceremony, trade, all of it timed to the turning of the year. The chief, or whoever stood at the center of Cahokia's power, may have been the one who read the sky, the one who told the people when to plant and when to rest. That kind of knowledge is power. It is the same kind of power that priests and kings have claimed across every civilization in human history. Other researchers are more careful. They say we are reading meaning into alignment that might be coincidence. They say we do not know enough about Cahokian belief to say what the Woodhenge meant to the people who built it. They are right to be careful. The posts are gone. The people are gone. The words they spoke inside that circle are gone with them. But Karen, the archaeologist with 30 years of dirt under her fingernails, will tell you that careful is not the same as closed. She stood inside that circle on the equinox, and the sun rose exactly where it was supposed to rise. Someone planned that. Someone watched the sky for years and years and learned its patterns, and then drove cedar posts into the earth so that other people standing in that same spot could see what they had seen. That is not coincidence. That is a gift left in the ground, waiting for someone to come back and receive it. Think about what it takes to feed 20,000 people every single day. Not a feast, not a celebration, just breakfast, just dinner, just the quiet, endless work of keeping a city alive. Cahokia solved that problem. And the way they solved it tells you almost everything about who they were. The land around Cahokia was some of the richest soil on Earth. The Mississippi and Missouri rivers had been flooding that plain for thousands of years, laying down dark, deep, almost impossibly fertile ground. The people who settled there didn't stumble onto good land by accident. They chose it. They understood it. They read the soil the way you might read a face, looking for what it could give. The main crop was corn, maize, the kind with small, hard kernels that could be dried and stored through a long winter. Archaeologists have found it everywhere at Cahokia, in storage pits, in cooking vessels, ground into paste and pressed into the walls of houses. Corn was the foundation. It was the thing that made a city possible. But corn alone doesn't feed 20,000 people. Not safely, not for generations. They also grew squash, beans, sunflowers, which gave them oil, and seeds rich with fat. They hunted deer and elk in the forests to the east. They pulled catfish and gar from the river. Fish so big a single one could feed a family for days. The river was not just a road. It was a pantry. It was a source of life that never ran dry, at least not then. What made Cahokia different from a village was not just the size of the harvest. It was the organization behind it. Someone had to decide how much to plant. Someone had to manage the storage. Someone had to make sure the surplus moved from the farms on the edge of the city into the hands of the people at the center. That kind of coordination doesn't happen by accident. It requires authority. It requires trust. It requires a system. And here is where the pieces start to rhyme. The same mound building that shaped Monk's Mound also shaped the neighborhoods around it. The plazas were not just ceremonial spaces. Researchers now believe they served as gathering points, places where food and goods moved between different parts of the city. The layout of Cahokia, with its central core and its rings of smaller mounds spreading outward like ripples in still water, may have been a map of how resources flowed. The closer you lived to the center, the more connected you were to that flow. Some archaeologists think Cahokia operated something like a redistribution economy. The elite at the top collected surplus from the farmers and craftspeople below, then gave it back out through feasts, ceremonies, and public works. The great communal events, the rituals at Woodhenge, the gatherings in the Grand Plaza, were not just spiritual. They were also the moments when the city fed itself together, when the bonds that held 20,000 strangers in one place were renewed over shared food and shared fire. Other researchers push back on that picture. They argue the evidence for centralized control is thinner than it looks. Cahokia's neighborhoods show real differences in wealth and diet. Yes, but they also show a surprising amount of independence. Some households kept their own stores. Some communities may have operated outside the central system entirely, trading laterally with their neighbors rather than funneling everything up to the elite. Both things might be true at once. Cities are rarely simple. What the bones tell us, and bones are some of the most honest witnesses archaeology has, is that the diet at Cahokia shifted sharply around 1050 AD. Before that date, the people in this region ate a wide variety of foods. After that date, corn becomes dominant in a way it never was before. The isotopes locked inside ancient teeth don't lie. Something changed. Something pushed the population toward a single crop in a way that was both powerful and, in hindsight, fragile. A city built on corn is a city with a weakness. One bad season could strain the system. 2 bad seasons could crack it. 3 could break something that took generations to build. But that comes later. For now, in the warm centuries of Cahokia's peak, the fields were full. The river ran silver with fish. The smoke from 1,000 cooking fires rose into a sky that seemed to hold the whole world in place. The city ate. The city grew. And nobody, not yet, was asking what would happen if the rains stopped coming. There is a place beneath the earth at Cahokia where the story changes. Not on top of the mounds, where the wind moves through the tall grass and the sky opens wide and blue above the old plazas. Not in the broad central square where 20,000 people once gathered. The story changes underground, in the dark, in a burial pit that nobody expected to find the way they found it. In 1967, archaeologists began digging into a low, unremarkable mound in the southern part of the site. They called it Mound 72. It sat quiet and flat, barely rising above the surrounding earth. Nothing about it suggested what was waiting inside. It looked like 1,000 other mounds scattered across the American Midwest. It looked like a hill. What they found inside stopped them cold. The first thing they uncovered was a man. He had been laid to rest on a bed of more than 20,000 shell beads. The beads were arranged in the shape of a bird, a falcon, with its wings spread wide beneath his body. The shells had come from the Gulf Coast, hundreds of miles to the south. Someone had carried them here, bead by bead, and laid them out with great care. The man rested on the wings of a creature that could cross the sky. Archaeologists called him Beaded Burial. They still do. He was not alone. Around him in the same mound, they found more than 250 other bodies. Some had been placed with great ceremony, surrounded by offerings. Copper, mica, arrowheads made from stone that came from distant mountains. But others had been laid in mass graves, dozens at a time, their bodies arranged in neat rows. Young women, mostly. Many of them showed signs that they had not died peacefully. This was not what anyone expected to find in a city built on corn and trade. The mound told two stories at once. One story was about power and beauty, about a man so important that the earth itself was shaped around him, that thousands of shells were gathered from the sea to honor his passing. The other story was harder to look at. It spoke of sacrifice, of lives given to the ground, or taken from the living and given to the dead. Nobody agrees on exactly what happened in Mound 72. Some researchers believe the mass burials were ritual sacrifices offered at the peak of Cahokia's power to honor a great leader. The sheer number of offerings, the careful arrangement, the imported materials from across the continent, all of it points to a society that believed deeply in ceremony, that believed the world required something in return for its gifts. Other researchers push back on that reading. They point out that mass burials appear in many ancient cultures and don't always mean sacrifice. disease could explain some of it, so could warfare. The bodies in the rows might have been people who died in a single terrible season and were buried together out of necessity, not ritual. The evidence, they say, is not as clear as it first appears. But here is what nobody disputes. The man on the bed of shells was real. The 20,000 beads were real. The care that went into placing him there was real. Someone at Cahokia, around the year 1000 AD, held enough power to command that kind of devotion. Enough power to reshape the earth above his grave. Enough power to pull resources from the Gulf Coast and the Great Lakes and the Rocky Mountains and lay them all at the feet of one man. That is the part that changes the picture. Before Mound 72, many scholars thought of Cahokia as a large trading center. Busy, organized, impressive, but not necessarily ruled by a single commanding authority. After Mound 72, that idea became harder to hold. What the mound suggested was something closer to a kingdom. A place where one person could sit above all others, literally and symbolically, and where the world was arranged around that person's life and death. The mound also raised a question that has never fully been answered. If Cahokia had rulers this powerful, rulers who could command sacrifice and ceremony on this scale, what happened to that power? Where did it go? How does a society capable of this kind of devotion simply dissolve into the prairie over the course of a few generations? The man on the bed of shells does not answer that question. He only makes it louder. He lies there still in the memory of the dig, wings spread beneath him, the Gulf Coast at his back, the sky above, waiting for someone to understand what he was trying to say. Somewhere beneath the old earth of Mound 72, workers found something that stopped them cold. It wasn't the bones. Archaeologists expect bones. It wasn't the copper or the mica or the thousands of arrowheads stacked in careful rows. Those things were strange, yes, but they had categories for strange. What they didn't have a category for was her. She was made of shell beads. 20,000 of them, maybe more. Tiny, white, and hand-drilled. Each one smaller than your thumbnail. Someone had laid them out on the ground in a precise shape. A long, curving body, a pointed beak, wings spread wide, like she was caught mid-flight. The figure was over 6 feet across, and underneath it, laid directly on top of this beaded image, were 2 bodies, a man and a woman, buried together on the back of a bird that someone had built from the earth up. The bird was a falcon, or something like a falcon. Archaeologists call her the beaded falcon. But the people who study Cahokia's religion and symbols have another name for what she represents. They call the figure the Red Goddess. Here's the part that stays with you. The falcon image wasn't just decoration. It wasn't a blanket or a mat. It was a cosmological map. In the belief systems of the Mississippian world, the falcon was a bridge. It lived between the sky world and the earth world. It carried messages. It carried souls. To be buried on the back of a falcon meant something enormous. It meant you were being carried somewhere. It meant someone believed you had the power to make that crossing. The woman buried on that image was young. Her bones suggest she was in her 20s. She had no obvious wounds, no sign of illness. She was placed with extraordinary care, her body arranged with intention, her arms close to her sides. She wasn't thrown there. She was placed like something precious, like something sacred. Nobody knows who she was. That's the riddle. Not just the beads, not just the bird, but the woman herself. In a city of 20,000 people, in a culture that clearly had ranks and roles, and a whole language of power written in burial goods. She was given one of the most elaborate graves ever found, and she left no name, no story, no oral tradition that anyone has yet connected to her. Some researchers believe she was a high-ranking priestess. The Mississippian world had ritual specialists, people who stood between the human and the divine. The falcon imagery, the careful placement, the sheer labor of 20,000 drilled shell beads. All of it points to someone of enormous spiritual authority. Others think she may have been a sacrifice, not a punishment, something closer to an honor. In some ancient belief systems, certain deaths were sacred. The person chosen wasn't a victim in the way we understand that word. They were a messenger. They were the ones selected to carry prayers across the boundary between worlds. Both theories can be true at once. That's the uncomfortable thing. A priestess and a sacrifice aren't opposites in every culture. Sometimes they're the same. But here's what neither theory fully explains. The beaded falcon beneath her wasn't a quick work. It took time. It took skill. It took someone who knew exactly what they were doing and why. The beads were laid in sequence with the precision of someone following a pattern they had memorized or been taught. This wasn't improvised grief. This was ceremony. This was knowledge, which means the red goddess wasn't a surprise. She was planned for. Someone in Cahokia, at the height of its power, decided that this woman's death would be marked this way. They gathered 20,000 shells. They drilled them by hand. They laid them out in the shape of a cosmic bird. They placed her body on top like she was being offered to the sky. And then they covered it all with earth. And the city kept going. And the centuries passed. And the mound sat quiet under the Illinois sun, holding its secret in the dark. When the archaeologists uncovered her in the 1960s, they had no framework for what they were seeing. Nothing in the European tradition of burial prepared them for this. Nothing in the textbooks they had read. They were looking at a theology, a complete, sophisticated, deeply considered theology, expressed in shell and bone and carefully placed earth. They could see the shape of it. They could measure it. They could photograph it. They still can't read it. The red goddess lies in a museum now, catalogued and studied, and still, after 60 years, not fully understood. She came from a world that knew things we don't, and she took most of those things with her. The bones don't lie. That's what archaeologists always say. And in the case of Cahokia, the bones had plenty to say. When researchers first began pulling skeletons from the mounds in the 20th century, they expected to find a healthy, thriving population. A city that size, a city that powerful, should have left behind strong bodies, well-fed people, people who lived long lives. What they found was something different. The bones told a harder story. Many of the people buried at Cahokia showed signs of serious stress, malnutrition, infections that had eaten into the bone, teeth worn down by grit from the stone-ground corn that made up most of their diet. Some skeletons showed signs of anemia, the kind that comes from a diet too heavy in one thing and too light in everything else. This is where the skeptics raised their hands. If Cahokia was this great civilization, they asked, why were its people so sick? Why did the bones show so much suffering? A city of 20,000 people packed into a floodplain, eating mostly corn, drinking water from the same rivers they lived beside. That's not a golden age. That's a public health crisis waiting to happen. And they weren't wrong to ask. Some researchers pushed further. They pointed to the skeletal evidence and argued that Cahokia might have been less of a thriving metropolis and more of a place where people were drawn in or pushed in against their will. A center of power that extracted labor from the people who lived under its shadow. The mounds didn't build themselves. 50 million baskets of dirt moved by human hands. Those hands belonged to somebody. And somebody had to decide whose hands they were. The skeptics looked at the bones and saw not glory, but cost. There's a theory, not a fringe one, that Cahokia functioned more like a tribute state than a free city. That the elites at the top lived well, while the people at the bottom ground corn until their teeth wore flat. The inequality written into the burial mounds. The man laid on 10,000 shell beads, while others were stacked in mass graves nearby. That inequality didn't disappear when the ceremonies ended. It was baked into the daily life of the city. That's a hard thing to sit with. But the skeptics say the bones make it unavoidable. And yet, here is where the skeptics run into trouble of their own. The same bone analysis that showed stress and malnutrition also showed something else. It showed people from hundreds of miles away. Isotope studies, the kind that read the chemistry of old bones like a diary, found that many of the people buried at Cahokia hadn't grown up there. They came from the north, from the south, from the edges of the continent. Some came from places so far away that researchers are still trying to figure out exactly where. People don't walk hundreds of miles toward suffering. Not willingly, not in numbers. So what were they walking toward? What did Cahokia offer that was worth that kind of distance? The skeptics don't have a clean answer for that. They can point to coercion, to tribute, to the kind of power that moves people, whether they want to move or not. But coercion alone doesn't explain the sheer variety of people who ended up there. It doesn't explain the trade goods, the copper from Lake Superior, the shells from the Gulf of Mexico, the ideas and symbols that traveled with those objects and showed up in the art and the ceremony of the city. Something was pulling people in, something real. The bones show suffering. That's true. But they also show a city that was, in some deep way, magnetic. A place that meant something to people across a vast stretch of the continent. A place worth traveling to, worth building toward, worth being part of. Maybe both things were true at once. Maybe Cahokia was a place of genuine power and genuine cost. A place where the vision was enormous and the price was paid by the people at the bottom. That's not so different from other great cities in other times. It doesn't make Cahokia smaller. It makes it more human. The bones told a complicated story. They always do. The skeptics read that story and saw a warning. A civilization that burned its people to keep the fires burning. And maybe they were right. Maybe that's exactly what happened. Maybe that's why, in the end, the city went quiet. But the bones also whispered something else. Something about distance and longing and the strange gravity of a place that once, for a little while, felt like the center of the world. There are people who look at Mound 72 and feel something shift inside them. Not fear, not confusion, something closer to recognition, like they already knew, somewhere deep and quiet, that this place held more than dirt and bone. Warren Whittree was one of those people. He was a careful man, a scientist. He spent years measuring post holes and mapping alignments at Cahokia, and he did not say things he couldn't prove. But when he stood at the edge of Mound 72 and understood what he was looking at, he said it plainly. This was not an ordinary burial. This was something else entirely. The mound itself is low and flat. It doesn't announce itself. You could walk past it on a gray afternoon and think nothing of it. But inside, archaeologists found one of the most remarkable burials ever uncovered in North America. A man laid out on a bed of more than 20,000 shell beads. The beads were arranged in the shape of a falcon. His arms spread wide. His body placed like a bird in flight. The shell came from the Gulf Coast, hundreds of miles south. Someone carried it here. Someone spent weeks or months stringing those beads into that shape. And then they laid a man down on top of it, and they buried him like he was the bird itself. Archaeologists called him Beaded Burial 1. But the people who have spent the most time with this find don't use that name with any distance. They say it quietly, like a title, like they're describing a king. Around him, more bodies, rows of young women laid carefully side by side. More men buried with bundles of arrows, with copper, with mica from the Appalachian Mountains. Everything pointed toward one idea. This man was not just a leader. He was something the city believed in, something the city organized itself around. Timothy Pocketat has spent decades studying Cahokia. He does not shy away from the word sacred. He says this burial tells us that Cahokia's rulers held a kind of power that went beyond politics. They were connected to the sky, to the cycle of seasons, to the falcon, which in many native traditions carries the spirit between worlds. This man was buried as that bridge. Some of his colleagues push back. They say we should be careful about reading spiritual meaning into what might be political theater. A ruler who wants to seem divine will arrange his burial to look divine. That doesn't mean the people believed it. That doesn't mean he was anything more than a very powerful man with very good architects. But Pocketat holds his ground. He points to the scale of it, the coordination required to gather those shells, that copper, that mica, from so many distant places. The sheer number of people who would have had to participate. You don't build something like this for theater alone. You build it because the belief is real, because the people carrying those baskets of shell beads believed they were doing something that mattered beyond this world. And here is the part that stays with you. The beads were arranged before the body was placed. Someone planned the shape of the falcon first. Then the man was laid into it, like he was being fitted into his true form, like the burial was completing something that had already begun in life. There is a researcher named Melissa Baltus who has spent years looking at the objects buried with Cahokia's dead. She talks about the way certain materials, copper especially, seemed to hold spiritual weight for these people. Copper was not just valuable, it was alive in their understanding. It carried power from the water, from the underworld, from the places where the living and the dead were closest to each other. She says the people who built Cahokia were not primitive. They were not simple. They had a cosmology, a way of understanding the universe that was as complete and as sophisticated as anything in the ancient world. And the beaded burial is one of the clearest windows we have into that understanding. The believers, the ones who look at this evidence and feel its full weight, are not asking you to take anything on faith. They are asking you to look at what was found: 20,000 shell beads, a falcon made of the sea, a man placed inside it like he belonged there. They are asking you to consider that the people of Cahokia knew something about the sky, about the dead, about the space between one world and the next, and that they buried that knowledge carefully in a low, flat mound in a field in Illinois, where it waited nearly 1,000 years for someone to come and find it. Copper doesn't rot. That's the thing about copper. You can bury it in wet black soil for 1,000 years, and it still comes back up green and gleaming, shaped exactly the way human hands left it. And when archaeologists started pulling copper pieces out of the ground around Cahokia, they noticed something strange right away. The copper wasn't local. It came from the upper Great Lakes, from the cold shores of Lake Superior, from places 600 miles north of the Mississippi floodplain. Someone carried it here. Someone made a choice to move that heavy, precious metal across rivers and forests and plains, all the way down to this bend in the river. That choice tells you everything about what Cahokia was. This city wasn't just a city. It was the center of something much larger. A web of exchange so wide it touched almost every corner of the continent. Shells from the Gulf of Mexico, mica from the mountains of North Carolina, thin and shimmering like frozen smoke. Chert from quarries in Illinois and Missouri, napped into blades so clean they look almost too perfect to have been made by hand. Pottery styles that show up in Arkansas and Wisconsin and Kansas, all carrying the same marks, the same symbols, the same fingerprints of Cahokia's influence. When you walk the floodplain now, you're walking on top of all of it. The ground holds it still. farmers have been turning up arrowheads and ceramic shards and strange carved stones for 200 years. Most of it went into boxes and attics and local museums with handwritten labels. But piece by piece, those objects told a story. Cahokia wasn't trading with its neighbors. It was trading with everyone. The Illinois River runs north of here, slow and brown in summer, carrying the smell of mud and cattails. The Missouri River joins the Mississippi just a few miles upstream. The Ohio comes in from the east. Stand at the right place on the bank, and you can feel it. The way all these waterways pull toward this one spot like spokes on a wheel. Cahokia sat at the hub. Every canoe moving up or down, the Mississippi passed within reach of its docks. The land remembers those routes. The old river channels are still there, pressed into the earth like the memory of a path. Some of them have dried up. Some have shifted, but the low places in the fields, the lines of cottonwood trees that follow invisible water, the way the ground stays soft long after a dry spell. Those are the old channels, the rivers that carried trade goods into Cahokia 1,000 years ago, left marks that no plow has fully erased. And the goods that came in didn't just sit in storage. They moved back out. Cahokia-style artifacts have turned up in burial mounds from Minnesota to Louisiana. That reach suggests something more than simple barter between neighbors. It suggests a city with real power, the kind of power that makes other people want to be connected to you, want to carry your symbols and your goods and maybe your ideas back home with them. Some researchers think Cahokia functioned almost like a sacred capital, a place people came to on purpose, for ceremony, for trade, for the kind of contact that only happens when you're standing in the biggest city anyone has ever seen. The mounds themselves may have been part of the draw. Monk's Mound visible from miles away, rising above the flat plain like a small mountain made by human will. If you were a trader from the Gulf Coast, arriving by canoe after weeks on the river, that sight must have stopped you cold. But the land also holds the cost of all that movement. The forests around Cahokia were stripped back hard. Wood for fires, wood for buildings, wood for the great palisade walls that eventually ringed the central precinct. The soil around the old city is thinner than it should be. Centuries of farming and foot traffic and construction wore it down. You can see it in the way certain fields drain differently, the way some patches of ground grow sparse grass, even in wet years. The earth gave everything it had to this city, and the city took it. That's not a judgment. That's just what cities do. They pull resources in from far away, and they use what's close at hand until it's gone. Cahokia was no different from any other great city in that way. It just did it 1,000 years before anyone in Europe thought to look this direction. The copper is still coming up out of the ground, green and patient, waiting to be found again. There was a game they played at Cahokia. You need to picture it clearly because it matters. A smooth stone disc, shaped like a lens, polished until it caught the light. A player rolled it across the flat clay of the plaza. Then the runners came. They sprinted after it, hurling long wooden poles, trying to land their spear as close as possible to where the stone would stop. The one who came closest won. Simple enough. Except nothing about this game was simple. The game was called Chunkey, and it was everywhere. Archaeologists have found chunky stones from the Great Lakes down to the Gulf of Mexico. They found them in Georgia, in Oklahoma, in the river valleys of Tennessee and Arkansas. The same shape, the same careful polish, the same smooth weight in the hand. Wherever Cahokia's influence reached, the game followed. It spread like a language, like a religion, like something people needed to believe in together. Some researchers think Chunkey was more than sport. They think it was a way of ordering the world. The stone rolled forward, and the future was uncertain. The spear flew, and a man staked his claim on what came next. Players sometimes bet everything they owned. Their tools, their food, their clothing. In some accounts, they bet their own freedom. Losing a chunky match could change a man's life completely. That kind of devotion doesn't come from a simple game. That comes from something sacred. Think about what you know of other American traditions. The Mesoamerican ball game, played for 1,000 years across Mexico and Central America, was tied to the movement of the sun. The ball was the sun. The court was the sky. The game was a ritual that held the cosmos in place. Scholars have long wondered if the two traditions were connected, if some version of that sacred game traveled north, changed shape, and became Chunkey on the Plazas of Cahokia. The evidence isn't clean. It never is with Cahokia, but the patterns are hard to ignore. Both games involved a moving object and a contest of aim and timing. Both were played in large public spaces at the center of cities. Both carried enormous social weight. Both seemed to say something about fate and skill and the gap between the two. Across the American Southeast, the game outlasted Cahokia itself. When European explorers arrived in the 1500s and 1600s, they found Chunkey still being played. The Spanish wrote about it. The French wrote about it. They described crowds gathering around the long clay courts. They described the shouting and the betting and the fierce concentration on the players' faces. One French account from the early 1700s described a Chunkey player so skilled that other men followed him from town to town just to watch him throw. That image stays with you. A man so good at a game that people traveled to witness him. A crowd gathered on flat ground under an open sky. The stone rolling, the spear in the air, everyone holding their breath. That scene was already ancient when the French saw it. It had been playing out on American soil for 600 years. Now think about what that means for Cahokia. The city is gone. The people scattered. The great plaza is quiet under grass and suburb. But the game they played there kept going. It moved through nations and generations like a river, finding new channels. The Choctaw played it. The Cherokee played it. The Mandan played it on the northern plains. Each group made it their own. Each group added their own rules and meanings. But the stone was the same. The motion was the same. The feeling of watching the disc roll and not knowing where it would stop was the same. There's something in that continuity that the archaeology alone can't give you. The mounds tell you where people lived. The bones tell you something about how they died. But Chunkey tells you something about what they cared about the way they understood chance and skill and the will of something larger than themselves. Some traditions hold that the Chunkey stone itself was a sacred object, not just a game piece, a thing with power, a thing that connected the player to the world below and the sky above. You rolled it, and the world answered. Cahokia was built by people who thought that way, who saw the flat plaza and the open sky not as empty space, but as a place where the human and the divine could meet, where a man with a polished stone and a wooden spear could, for one long moment, touch something true. The stone kept rolling long after the city fell. Maybe it's still rolling now. The river gave them everything, and then, slowly, it started taking it back. You can hold the evidence in your hands now. Archaeologists have pulled it from the mud and the silt and the dark layers of earth that built up along the floodplain over centuries. Broken pottery, waterlogged wood, seeds pressed flat as paper, layers of fine gray silt deposited by floodwater, sitting right on top of layers where people once cooked and slept and worked. The flood record is written in the ground itself, and it is not a gentle story. Around 1150 AD, something shifted. The Mississippi and its tributaries had always flooded. That was part of the bargain. Spring floods brought rich black soil to the fields. They filled the low places with fish. They kept the land alive. But the floods that came in the middle years of Cahokia's life were different. Bigger, meaner, the kind that don't recede in a week. Researchers found a thick band of flood sediment beneath the soil of the central precinct. That band dates to somewhere between 1100 and 1200 AD. It sits like a gray scar across the record. Below it, the signs of a busy city. Above it, something quieter. Something changed. The pottery tells part of the story. Cahokia's craftspeople made a distinctive style of ceramic, smooth and fine, with a kind of shell-tempered clay that archaeologists can identify on site. That pottery spread across the continent through trade. You find it in Wisconsin. You find it in Tennessee. You find it in Kansas. But around this same period, the distribution starts to thin. The reach of Cahokia's goods begins to pull back toward the center, like a tide going out. Some researchers look at this and see a city under pressure. A city spending more energy on survival and less on expansion. A city that may have flooded badly enough to damage the lower neighborhoods. The the ones built close to the water, the ones most vulnerable to a river that had stopped behaving. But other researchers push back on that reading. They point out that flood sediment doesn't prove disaster. Floods happened all the time. The people of Cahokia were expert engineers. They built raised platforms for exactly this reason. Monk's Mound itself sits high enough to have survived almost any flood the river could have thrown at it. Maybe the flood layers just mean a wet season. Maybe the city adapted and moved on. The seeds are harder to argue with. Botanical samples from Cahokia's soil layers show a slow but steady shift in what people were eating. Early on, the variety is wide. Goosefoot and maygrass and knotweed alongside corn. A diverse diet spread across many crops. But as the centuries pass, corn becomes more and more dominant. The other plants fade from the record. By the later periods, the diet looks narrow, dependent, the kind of food system that works beautifully when everything goes right and collapses fast when it doesn't. Corn is a hungry crop. It pulls nitrogen from the soil. Plant it in the same fields year after year, and the soil starts to give out. The yields drop. You need more land. You clear more trees. And when you clear more trees along a riverbank, the river has less to hold it. The floods get worse. The soil washes away faster. One problem feeds the next. There is a piece of wood pulled from a waterlogged context near one of the outer precincts that tells a quiet version of this story. It's a post, a big one, the kind used in construction. The tree it came from was old when it was cut, and the rings inside it show decades of good growth followed by years of narrow rings, tight and pale, the kind that form when a tree is stressed. Drought years, dry summers. The tree survived them barely. Then someone cut it down and used it to build something. And then the flood came and buried it. One post, one tree, one small piece of a city of 20,000 people, but it holds the whole story in its grain. The artifacts don't tell you why Cahokia fell. They're not that simple. What they tell you is that the world around the city was changing, and the city was changing with it. The river that built Cahokia was also the river that tested it. The same water that carried trade canoes from the Gulf Coast also carried floodwater into the lower plazas. The same soil that grew the corn also wore out. The river didn't turn against them all at once. It just slowly, quietly, stopped being as generous as it once was. And a city built on generosity has to figure out what to do next. There is a kind of memory that lives in the body before it lives in the mouth. You don't learn it from a book. You feel it first, in the way your grandmother's hands go still when a certain kind of dry wind blows in off the plains, in the way your grandfather changes the subject when someone mentions a bad harvest. The story is there. It just takes a while to find the words. The people who left Cahokia carried something with them when they went. Not gold, not monuments. They carried the memory of what it felt like when the rain stopped coming. Imagine a summer that never quite breaks. The sky stays white and hard, like the inside of a shell. The corn comes up short. The stalks are thin and pale, and the ears are small. You look at what you've grown and you do the math. It doesn't add up. Not for 20,000 people. Not even close. The drought that hit the Mississippi Valley in the late 1200s was not a single event. It came in waves. A dry year, then a wet year that almost made you forget, then 2 dry years together, then 3. The river still ran, but the floodplain fields that had fed the city for 200 years started giving less and less. The soil had been worked hard. The forests around the city had been cut for timber and firewood. The land was tired in a way that rest alone couldn't fix. Archaeologists have found the evidence in the dirt itself. Pollen samples from the region show a sharp drop in corn pollen starting around 1200 AD. Tree ring data from the broader Mississippi Valley confirms the dry spells. The land was not imagining it. The hunger was real. But here is where the story gets complicated, the way family stories always do. Some researchers look at the same evidence and say the drought alone can't explain what happened. Cities have survived droughts before. Cultures have adapted. They've moved their fields, changed their crops, traded for what they couldn't grow. Cahokia had the trade networks to do exactly that. So why didn't they? The answer some scholars give is that the drought didn't just shrink the food supply. It cracked something deeper. A city like Cahokia ran on belief as much as it ran on corn. The great chief at the top of Monk's Mound was not just a political leader. He was a spiritual one. His power came partly from his connection to the sky, to the seasons, to the turning of the year. The Woodhenge tracked the solstices. The Plazas held the ceremonies. The whole city was built around the idea that the right rituals, performed by the right people, kept the world in order. When the rains stopped coming, that belief started to fray. If the ceremonies were supposed to bring the harvest, and the harvest wasn't coming, what did that mean about the ceremonies? What did it mean about the people performing them? That question must have moved through the city like a slow fire. Quiet at first, then louder. The families who passed this story down didn't always have words for the politics of it, but they had words for the feeling, the sense that something sacred had broken, that the center could no longer hold the edges together, that it was time to go. And so they went, not all at once. That's not how a city dies. It thins. A family here, a clan there. Someone's cousin left last season and sent word that the land to the north was better. Someone's uncle packed his tools and followed the river south. The great plazas didn't empty in a single night. They emptied over decades, the way a fire goes out, not with a sudden darkness, but with a long, slow cooling. The silence that followed was not just the silence of empty buildings. It was the silence of people choosing not to speak about what they had left behind. There is a theory among some scholars that the descendants of Cahokia's people carried a kind of grief so large they had no way to hold it in story, that the city's fall was not just a practical loss, but a spiritual one. A wound that was easier to let scar over than to keep reopening. The Osage, the Quapaw, the Chickasaw, nations whose ancestors may have walked those plazas. None of them kept a story that says plainly, "We built that place, and then we lost it." Maybe the silence is the story. Maybe some things are too heavy to carry in words, so you carry them in your hands instead. In the way you plant, in the way you watch the sky, in the way you go still when a dry wind blows in and you can't quite say why. Nobody left a note. That's the thing that sits with you when you study Cahokia long enough. No carved stone that says, "We are going." No burned archive. No final ceremony recorded in a language we can read. The city simply grew quieter, then quieter still. Then one day the fires weren't lit anymore, and the great plaza filled with wind instead of voices. Archaeologists call it abandonment, but that word feels too cold for what must have happened here. Think about what these people were leaving. They were walking away from the largest city their world had ever known. From Mounds, their grandparents' grandparents had carried dirt to build, basket by basket, year by year, from a skyline that could be seen for miles across the flat Illinois plain. From a place that had once held 20,000 souls, all of them eating and trading and praying and arguing and falling in love under the same wide sky. You don't walk away from something like that easily. The best evidence suggests the leaving wasn't sudden. It was slow. It was the kind of slow that you don't notice until it's already done. A family moves north one spring and doesn't come back. A neighborhood empties out over a generation. The market stalls thin out. The big ceremonies get smaller. The priests have fewer people to speak to. And then one morning, someone looks around and realizes the city is mostly memory now. Some researchers believe the leaving began as early as 1200. Others put the real decline closer to 1300. By 1400, the site was largely empty. 400 years of civilization, and it wound down the way a fire winds down. Not with a crash, with a long, slow dimming. Where did they go? That question has no clean answer, and anyone who tells you otherwise is guessing. Some scholars point north and east. They see similarities between Cahokia's pottery styles and those found in communities along the upper Mississippi and into what is now Wisconsin and Minnesota. The shapes of certain bowls, the way certain designs repeat. It's not proof, but it's a thread. Others look south and west. The Osage, the Quapaw, the Omaha tribes, who would later be found across Missouri and Arkansas, and the Great Plains, carry traditions and ceremonial practices that echo what we know of Cahokia. The way they organized their villages, the way they oriented their sacred spaces to the sun, the way certain stories describe a great city from a long ago time, a place of power and ceremony that the ancestors once called home. The descendants themselves rarely name Cahokia directly, and that silence is its own kind of evidence. Some anthropologists believe the silence is intentional, that Cahokia fell in a way that was shameful or painful to remember. A political collapse, a failure of leadership, a moment when the promises made by the people at the top of those mounds turned out to be hollow. When the rains didn't come because the chief prayed for them, and the crops failed anyway, and the people decided the whole arrangement wasn't worth keeping. Other researchers push back on that. They say the silence might simply mean that the descendants don't recognize Cahokia as their story, that the city was cosmopolitan, a place where many different groups came together. And when it fell apart, those groups scattered back to their own older identities. Cahokia wasn't one people's home. It was a meeting place. And when the meeting ended, everyone went back to where they'd come from. Both of those ideas can be true at once. What feels certain is this: the people who left Cahokia carried something with them. You can't live in a city like that for generations and leave empty-handed. They carried knowledge of the stars, learned from years of watching the Woodhenge mark the seasons. They carried farming techniques that had fed tens of thousands. They carried stories, even if the stories changed shape over time. Even if the city in the story became something vaguer, something older, something that sounded more like a dream than a place you could walk to. They carried the memory of what it felt like to be part of something enormous. That's not nothing. That's everything, actually. The Mounds stayed behind, solid and patient, the way only Earth can be. The great plaza filled with grass. The river kept moving. The prairie crept back in from the edges, slow and green and indifferent, covering the streets and the plazas and the fire pits and the places where children once played. The city became a secret the land was keeping, and the land is very good at keeping secrets. Close your eyes for a moment. Not really, keep listening. But imagine you are standing outside alone on the wide, flat ground of the American bottom. The Mississippi is somewhere to the east. You can't see it, but you can feel it. The air carries that river smell dark water, wet mud, the faint sweetness of river grass bending in the current. It is night, a clear night, the kind you only get far from cities. The sky above you is enormous. Stars press down like scattered salt on black cloth. So many of them that the darkness between them seems almost thin. The Milky Way cuts across the whole sky in a pale river of light, and you stand beneath it, feeling very small and very still. The ground under your feet is soft. The grass is long and cool against your ankles. Somewhere nearby, a cricket sings, then another, then 1,000 all at once, filling the dark air with that steady, ancient sound. You are standing in the shadow of Monk's Mound. You can't see it clearly. It's just a shape against the stars, a darkness that rises where the sky should be. But you feel its size, the way a mountain makes you feel, the way a cathedral does, something large and old and patient, sitting in the night, breathing slowly. This is the place. This is where it happened. Right here, 1,000 years ago, a city stood. Not a village, not a camp. A city. 20,000 people, maybe more, living and working and trading and praying on this exact ground. The air would have smelled like cook fires and river fish and cedar smoke. You would have heard drums on certain nights. You would have seen torchlight moving along the tops of the mounds. You would have heard voices, hundreds of voices, in languages we no longer know how to speak. Now there is only the cricket's song and the wind moving through the tall grass. The prairie swallowed it. That is the only way to say it. Not all at once, not in a single disaster, but slowly, the way the earth takes everything back if you give it enough time. The houses rotted. The wooden posts of the Woodhenge fell and sank into the soil. The plazas filled with sediment and grass. The smaller mounds eroded in the rain, season by season, until they were just gentle rises in the land, easy to miss if you weren't looking. The big mounds stayed. They were too large to disappear. Monk's Mound is still here, still rising 100 feet into the sky, still the largest earthwork in North America. It outlasted the city that built it. It will outlast us too, most likely. Stand here long enough and you start to feel the layers. The grass under your feet grew from soil that grew from centuries of human life. Broken pottery is down there, just a few inches below the surface in some places. Charcoal from fires that burned when William the Conqueror was crossing the English Channel. Corn pollen from fields that fed a civilization. Bone fragments from people who watched the same stars you are watching right now. The stars haven't changed much. The same constellations that the Cahokian priests tracked from their wooden circles are still up there. Orion, the Pleiades, the slow wheel of the sky turning through the seasons, just as it always has. They watched this sky carefully. They built their whole city around it. The Woodhenge posts lined up with the solstice sunrise. The great mound aligned with the cardinal directions. They knew where they were in the universe. They knew when the year turned. They marked it, celebrated it, built monuments to it that have lasted 1,000 years. And then they left. The city emptied out over the course of a century or two. Quietly, the way a fire dies down when no one tends it. People drifted away in small groups, following the rivers, following the seasons, carrying their stories with them. The mounds stayed behind, silent and enormous, waiting for someone to ask the right questions. The wind picks up a little. The grass whispers. An owl calls from somewhere in the dark. One long, low note that hangs in the air and then fades. You are standing in one of the most important places in American history. Most people drive past it on the interstate without looking up. Most people have never heard the name Cahokia. Most people don't know that a city this size ever existed here, on this ground, under this sky. But the ground knows. The mounds know. And now, standing here in the dark with the stars overhead and the cricket song all around you, so do you. There is a kind of memory that lives in the body before it lives in the mind. The Osage people carried it for centuries, not written down, not carved in stone, passed mouth to ear, grandmother to grandchild, in the long, quiet hours before sleep. And what they carried, without always naming it, was the shape of a world that had come before them. The Osage called themselves Nayukonska, children of the middle waters. They traced their origins to the great river country, to the wide, flat lands where the Mississippi and Missouri rivers breathe against each other like two sleeping giants. They knew those mounds. They walked past them. They hunted in their shadows and camped in their long green corridors. The mounds were not ruins to the Osage. They were presences, old ones, something that deserved respect and careful distance. Osage oral tradition speaks of a time when the world was full of great people, people who built things that touched the sky, people who understood the stars in ways that ordinary men could not. These stories were not attached to Cahokia by name, because Cahokia had no name that survived, but the shape of the memory fits. The scale of it fits. A city of 20,000 people does not vanish without leaving a mark on the stories of everyone who came after. What the textbooks forgot, the Osage remembered in a different language, not the language of dates and soil samples, the language of ceremony. The Osage held the cosmos in their clan structure itself. Half the clans represented the sky, half represented the earth. The whole society was built like a model of the universe, two halves in balance. The way Cahokia's great plaza sat balanced between the earth mound and the open sky. That is not coincidence. That is inheritance. Scholars spent a long time arguing about whether any living Native American nation had a real connection to Cahokia. Some said the city was too old, too distant, too forgotten. They pointed to the silence in the oral records. No tribe, they said, claims Cahokia directly. And that is true. No tribe says, we built Monk's Mound, we laid those cedar posts, we buried the Beaded man. But absence of a direct claim is not absence of connection. Memory does not always wear a name tag. The Osage were not the only ones. The Quapaw, the Ponca, the Omaha, the Kansa, all Siouan-speaking peoples, all with deep roots in the Mississippi Valley, all with ceremonial traditions that echo faintly but clearly the world that Cahokia built. The Chunkey game survived in their cultures long after the city fell. The reverence for the four directions survived. The idea that the center of the world was a sacred place, a place where earth and sky met, and something holy lived between them. That survived too. When European settlers arrived in the Illinois country, they found the mounds already ancient, already grass-covered and silent. The people living nearby did not claim them, but they also did not disturb them lightly. There was a wariness, a kind of inherited politeness toward those old earthen shapes. Even people who could not explain why they felt it. The Osage were eventually pushed from their homeland, forced west into Kansas, and then Oklahoma, in the long, brutal series of removals that emptied the old river country of its people. They carried what they could carry: their ceremonies, their clan songs, their way of reading the sky. And somewhere inside all of that, folded into the oldest prayers, was the memory of a world that had been large and ordered and full of meaning. Today, Osage scholars and tribal historians are part of the conversation about Cahokia in ways they were not a generation ago. They sit at the table with archaeologists. They offer readings of the evidence that no soil sample can provide. When they look at the layout of the great city, at the careful alignment of Mound and Plaza and Post, they recognize something, not as tourists recognize a landmark, as family recognizes a face. That is the legacy that no textbook captured for a very long time. Not the mounds themselves, though the mounds are extraordinary. Not the artifacts, though the artifacts are beautiful. The legacy is continuity. The idea that a civilization does not simply end. It transforms. It scatters. It travels in the bodies of its children and the songs of its grandchildren, and the shape of ceremonies performed 1,000 miles from where they began. The city fell silent, but the people did not disappear. They walked out into a wide world and kept walking. And some of what they carried, they are still carrying now. Picture a man named Elias Coles. He's standing in a field in southern Illinois, sometime around 1830. The morning is pale and cold. Frost still clings to the dead corn stalks from last season. His boots are muddy. His plow is stuck. It's stuck because he hit something underground, something solid, something that shouldn't be there. He digs with his hands for a while. Then he finds a pot. Dark clay, smooth on the outside, with a pattern pressed into it that he doesn't recognize. He turns it over in his hands. He sets it on a fence post. He goes back to plowing. That pot sat on that fence post for years. His children played with it. His wife used it to hold dried beans. Nobody knew what it was. Nobody asked. The land around them was full of strange humps and rises that the locals called Indian mounds, and most farmers treated them the same way they treated tree stumps. Obstacles, things to plow around or plow through. Elias Coles is not a famous man. You won't find him in any history book, but his story is the story of how Cahokia survived the centuries after its fall. Not through careful preservation, not through reverence, through accident, through the hands of people who had no idea what they were touching. By the early 1800s, the great city had been silent for 400 years. The forests had grown back over the plazas. The wooden buildings had rotted into the soil. The smaller mounds had softened into gentle hills that looked almost natural if you didn't know what to look for. And most people didn't. Settlers poured into the American bottom in waves. They came from Kentucky and Virginia and Tennessee. They came looking for rich soil, and they found it. The same floodplain that had fed 20,000 people was still one of the most fertile stretches of land in North America. The settlers plowed it up and planted corn, the same crop the Cahokians had grown, on the same ground, without knowing. Some of them noticed things. A man named Henry Brackenridge traveled through the region in 1811 and stood at the base of Monk's Mound with his mouth open. He wrote about it. He sent letters to Thomas Jefferson. He said this mound was bigger than the pyramids of Egypt, and that the American public should know about it. Jefferson wrote back, politely interested. Nothing happened. The problem wasn't just ignorance. It was a story people had already decided to believe. The story went like this. The land had always been wilderness. The native people who lived here were nomads. They didn't build cities. They didn't have governments or priests or astronomers. The mounds must have been built by someone else. A lost white race, some said. Vikings, said others. Egyptians, Israelites, anyone but the people who were actually here. That story was easier to live with. It meant the land had no prior owners worth worrying about. It meant the displacement of native nations was not the erasure of civilization, but the taming of empty wilderness. The mounds were a mystery because people needed them to be a mystery. truth was too inconvenient. So the farmers plowed, and the pots came up, and the bones came up, and the copper ornaments, and the shell beads, and the carved stone figures came up, and most of it was tossed aside or sold to curiosity collectors in St. Louis, or simply left to weather on fence posts like Elias Coles's dark clay pot. But here is the strange thing about stories. They don't die just because nobody is telling them. They go quiet. They go underground. They wait in the soil the same way seeds wait, patient and still, until the conditions are right. Some of those settlers had neighbors, and some of those neighbors were native families who had never fully left the region, or who had returned after the forced removals, or who carried in their own family lines a thread of memory that connected them to this place. They didn't always speak about it openly. It wasn't safe to, but they knew. They looked at the mounds, and they felt something that the settlers didn't feel, a kind of recognition. The story of Cahokia survived the 1800s the way most true things survive hard times. In pieces, in fragments, in a pot on a fence post, and a letter to a president who didn't act, and a quiet knowing passed between people who understood what the land was holding. The city was gone, but the ground remembered, and some of the people remembered too. The mounds are still here. That is the first thing to understand. After everything, the floods, the droughts, the plows, the parking lots, the centuries of silence, the mounds are still here. They rise out of the Illinois plain like slow green breaths, patient, unhurried, as if they have been waiting for someone to finally ask the right question. And we still don't know what that question is. That's the honest truth of Cahokia. Not that we've lost the answers. It's that we're not even sure we've found the right questions yet. Every time archaeologists think they understand this place, the ground gives up something new. A cache of copper, a painted wall, a burial that doesn't fit any pattern they've seen before. The city keeps revising itself. Think about what we do know. Around 1050 AD, something extraordinary happened on the Mississippi floodplain. A city rose up almost overnight by the slow clock of history. 20,000 people, maybe more. Plazas wide enough to hold a modern stadium. a pyramid of packed earth taller than a 10-story building. Woodhenge circles that tracked the sun across the year with a precision that still impresses astronomers today. Trade routes that carried copper from Lake Superior and shells from the Gulf of Mexico through this one central place. And then, by 1400, it was gone, not destroyed, not burned, not conquered, just emptied. The people walked away from the largest city north of Mexico and left almost no spoken memory of it behind. The descendants of those people, the Osage, the Quapaw, the Chickasaw, the many nations who carry Cahokian blood in their veins, they kept other things: songs, ceremonies, ways of reading the sky. But the city itself slipped beneath the surface of memory like a stone into still water. Why, that single word is the open door this story walks through and never quite comes back from. Why did they leave? Was it the drought that cracked the earth and shrank the rivers? Was it the soil, exhausted after 3 centuries of feeding a metropolis? Was it political, the old order crumbling, the chiefs losing their grip, the people deciding that the grand experiment had run its course? Was it disease moving up the trade routes before Europeans even arrived on the coast? Every theory has evidence behind it. Every theory has a hole in it too. Some researchers believe the city didn't collapse so much as transform. That the people didn't abandon Cahokia so much as they redistributed across the continent, carrying its ideas with them. The ceremonial mound building that appears across the southeast centuries after Cahokia's peak, that didn't come from nowhere. The Chunkey game that spread from tribe to tribe like a living tradition, that didn't invent itself. Cahokia may have ended as a city and continued as a culture, spreading outward the way a fire spreads, not dying, but changing shape. Others push back on that. They say the silence is too complete, that if Cahokia's people had simply dispersed and carried their world with them, we'd hear it more clearly in the oral traditions of the nations that followed. The near total absence of direct memory, they argue, suggests something more traumatic. A rupture, a wound in the story that people chose not to pass down. Both of those things can feel true at the same time. And then there's the question that sits beneath all the other questions. The one that doesn't have a theory attached to it yet. What was Cahokia at its heart? Was it a city in the way we use that word? Was it a ceremonial center that people traveled to and then returned home from? Was it a political capital, an empire's beating heart? Was it something we don't have a word for yet? A kind of human gathering that our categories can't quite hold. The mounds don't answer. They just stand there in the afternoon light, their long green slopes catching the last warmth of the day. Monk's Mound throws its shadow east as the sun goes down, a shadow that stretches longer than a city block, reaching across the plaza where 20,000 people once walked and traded and watched the sky. You can stand at the base of that mound and feel the weight of all those baskets of earth above you, 50 million of them, carried by hand, one at a time, by people whose names we will never know. They built something that lasted 1,000 years. They wanted to be remembered. We just haven't figured out yet what they wanted us to remember. You've been with this story for a long time now. The fire has burned down low. The coals are orange and quiet, breathing slow like something almost asleep. The night has settled in around you, heavy and soft, the way a good night should feel. And somewhere out there, past the dark, past the highway noise and the parking lots and the strip malls of southern Illinois, there is a field, a wide, flat, ancient field. And in that field, a mound rises up from the earth like a sleeping giant, patient as stone, older than any building you have ever walked through. It was always there. That's the thing about Cahokia that stays with you long after the story is done. It didn't disappear. It didn't vanish into myth the way Atlantis did, swallowed by some dramatic wave. It just got quiet. It got covered. The prairie grass grew back over the plazas. The river shifted. The trees came in. And the world moved on without it, the way the world always does. But the mounds stayed. Monk's Mound is still there right now, tonight, while you're listening to this. It rises 100 feet above the Illinois plain, dark against the sky, its flat top open to the stars. It has stood through 1,000 winters. It has watched the river flood and recede 10,000 times. It was old when the first Europeans set foot on this continent. It will be old long after were gone. There is something deeply calming about that. We spend so much of our lives thinking that what we build has to last, has to be remembered, has to be written down somewhere, or it doesn't count. Cahokia says something different. It says that 20,000 people lived full lives here. They raised children and played games and watched the sun rise over a cedar post on the longest morning of the year. They carried baskets of earth on their backs and built something so large it still changes the horizon. And they did all of that without leaving us a single word. They didn't need our memory to make their lives real. The mystery of why they left is still open. The drought theory, the flood theory, the political collapse, the soil gone thin and gray after 2 centuries of farming. None of them fully explain it. Maybe all of them are true at once. Maybe the city didn't fall so much as it exhaled. Maybe the people simply decided it was time to go, the way people sometimes do, and they walked out into the world they had always known, and they kept living. Their descendants are still here. The Osage, the Quapaw, the Ponca, the Omaha. They carry something of this place inside them. Even if the name Cahokia was never passed down in the stories they tell, the connection is in the bones of the land, in the way certain tribes still orient their ceremonies toward the sun, still mark the solstice, still feel the pull of the great river. The story was never really lost. It was just waiting for someone to look down. And now, thanks to LiDAR and ground-penetrating radar and the slow, patient work of archaeologists digging in the summer heat, we are finally looking. We are finding plazas under cornfields. We are finding post holes where the great wooden circles stood. We are finding the faint outlines of a city that was, for a brief and brilliant century, the most remarkable place on this continent. It was always there. We just forgot how to see it. That's the gift of a story like this one. It reminds you that the ground under your feet has a memory, that the places you drive past without thinking, the low hills, the flat fields, the bends in old rivers, they hold things. They hold whole worlds sometimes, worlds that were full of sound and color and life, worlds that are quiet now, resting under the grass and the dark. Cahokia is resting tonight. The mound is dark against a sky full of stars. the same stars the people of this city watched from the top of that great flat summit 1,000 years ago. The air over the floodplain smells of river mud and cut grass and something older, something you can't quite name. The crickets are going. The river is moving, slow and silver, somewhere in the dark. The city is at peace, and so now are you. Subscribe for a brand new mystery every night. One tap, and a new story is waiting for you tomorrow. Sleep well.